Ever wonder what goes into building a successful software company? Well, for part one of this Tools of the Trade Academy lesson, we're talking to Steve Stencil, the founder and CTO of Leap, and he's here to share his story about how Leap got started. Enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome to the Contractor Success Academy. Today I'm super excited because we're doing something new. Today, we've got the founder and CTO of Leap, Steve Stencil. Steve, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So like I said, Steve is the founder and CTO of Leap, and he started this company out of necessity. Steve, I'd like to, before we kind of get into the software, we're going to be doing a demo today. I'd like to kind of ask you a couple questions about how you got your start and what kind of prompted Leap. So if you don't mind, let's kind of get into that.
Sure. So I got into home improvement sales when my best friend actually started a fence and deck company with his father-in-law. And he asked me to come do sales for him because at the time I was selling electronics, actually cell phones. And he said, hey, you can make a lot more money selling home improvements than you can selling cell phones. Like, all right, I'll give it a shot. So I live in the state of Maryland, and in Maryland we have what's called the Maryland Home Improvement Commission. So you actually have to go take a test and get a license, kind of like a real estate agent, to do in-home sales for home improvements. So I went down to take the test, and I initially failed it, and it was crazy because it was an open book test, which I later found out I had the wrong book. So I had the book to become a contractor, not to become a sales rep. Anyway. I ended up doing some research online, and I found a company out of the Baltimore, Maryland area that would hire me and train me and kind of show me the ropes. And my intention was initially to work for them, learn the ropes, and then go work for my buddy after I got my license and learn how to do it. So I started working for this company. It was called New Look Home Design, and they initially trained me on how to sell windows, so how to measure them, how to do the pitch, how to create value, how to overcome objections, etc. So as soon as I got out of training, I ran, 2-3 leads, and during training, and of course during those leads, I just seen a bunch of inefficiencies. I'm also a techie. I had the first Palm Pilot, I had the Palm Pre, the slider phone that had the keyboard and all that stuff on it. So I just love technology, and I tried to always figure out a way to use technology to make my life easier, especially in sales. So early on, I built an Excel spreadsheet. And a lot of contractors today still use Excel spreadsheets, and you can really make them advanced. And I had made mine where I had sold initially windows, so I put my window price guide in there. But then as time went on and I got better and learned more, I was also selling roofing and siding and gutters and trim and doors, etc. So I had a spreadsheet that I created a tab for each category of product that I sold on it. And then I had kind of a home tab that I would display all my numbers. So I'd enter in all my measurements one time, and then the spreadsheet would calculate, how much the total project is with the maximum discount I can give to the customer. I had a bunch of selections for financing, and I would just click a little checkbox or whatever for the financing, and it would calculate a monthly payment. I would type in how much I sold it for, and it would give me how much my commission was. And I used that for about a year and a half. I had then purchased an iPad 2. It was the second iPad that came out, and it was actually the first Apple product I had ever purchased. And I had wanted to put my spreadsheet on the iPad, but at the time, Microsoft Office did not exist on the iPad. So I tried to rebuild my spreadsheet, which I spent 2 years perfecting. I tried to rebuild that in Numbers, which is the Apple's version of Excel, and it just wasn't cutting it. It wasn't the same product, right? So I then had my iPad was probably $1,000 at the time, and I had a $1,000 device that I could surf the internet, check my email, and play Angry Birds. There really wasn't much I could do with the thing as far as work goes. So I took up computer programming as a hobby, actually, and I sold exterior remodeling. And in that industry, it's very seasonal. So in the winter time, it gets very slow, and I had a lot of free time. So I took up computer programming again. I'm a techie, and I wanted something more to do with my iPad. I had really no intentions at this time on building a sales app, but I just wanted to build an app in general and know how to do it. This was also a time when apps were all the craze, and the people were just building apps in their bedrooms and stuff, and they were blowing up on the App Store. So I bought a book. I remember it was at the first book I ever bought, I think, was C++ for Dummies. Wow. And I started reading that, and it was really slow. I got about halfway through it, and I realized, hey, I can't really make anything with my iPad with this programming language. So I want to get something I can program my iPad with. And then I found a different book, and it was actually, I bought it on my iPad, an ebook. I still have it. It costs $7, and it's basically Introduction to iOS programming. And I just, again, I was just getting my feet wet. I knew nothing how to write programming. And I just started reading that cover to cover, and I'm going in my iPad and I'm just typing things in. And in the book, it told you, hey, there are going to be times where you have no idea what you're doing or what you're reading or what you're typing, but just keep sticking with it, and eventually things will start to click and make sense. And that's exactly what happened. And at the end of the book, it told you, now go build an app that you would use in your everyday life and make it good for you, even if it means recreating an app that already exists. So I was like thinking, well, man, it'd be great to rebuild Angry Birds, but that's like climbing Mount Everest when you're an entry-level programmer. So I went back to my spreadsheet and I said, hey, I'm going to go back and kind of connect these dots for myself, and I'm going to replace the functionality of my spreadsheet in an iOS app. And that's what I did. So for the next couple months, I was just recreating the functionality of my spreadsheet with putting in my measurements, it calculating a price, it's spitting out a payment for some financing. So I built this spreadsheet, and when I was working at New Look, I was actually their top sales rep for about 7 years. Towards the end there, towards the last year, I had sales reps that were constantly doing ride-alongs with me because, I was the most seasoned 10-year sales rep. I had really good numbers. I was very consistent every single month. And reps would come out of training. They were doing, ride-alongs, and then they would see how I did it, where I had an app that I was putting in all my pricing, spitting out a number, presenting it to the homeowner, very professional and different than what they were learning in training. Eventually, the company that I worked for took an interest in what I was doing. And they kind of started to adopt it. So we created like a little pilot group. We created a group chat with about 4 or 5 other sales reps that were experienced and pretty good at closing deals, and install the app on their iPads, and they started using it. And in the group chat, I would get messages like, hey, I was unable to do this in the house. I had to revert back to the old way of doing things. Or, hey, I made this mistake. Is there any way that the app can prevent me from doing that? So we started building in logic into the app to prevent those types of scenarios. So we would say, okay, put in your measurements, select the finance option or promotional plan or whatever that you want to sell, and then the app will give you the maximum discounts that you can do. And that immediately, I remember there was a guy that I worked with was an amazing closer. I mean, some months he would close 80-90% of the leads that he ran. But he would never make any money on the deals because he could never do the math right. He would measure the windows or measure the roof or whatever it would be, and the math would just get in his way. He forgot to carry the one or whatever it be, and he's $1,000 under minimum. So then he gets 0% on his commission. So when we built that type of functionality there, like that specific sales rep, that was probably the biggest pay raise that he ever got because he was still able to close the deals. And in sales, it's all just psychology on, hey, this is the lowest price that I can sell. I know that's the lowest price I can sell, and now I need to close the deal on that.
It's either he started making money or his closing rate dropped like crazy because now he's actually got to sell and make money on the deal.
Exactly. But it was a mind game to him because, he knew, like, let's say that he was sitting at 10,000 and his rock bottom minimum was 9,000. If he was sitting there trying to turn the screws and overcome objections at 10,000, in the back of his mind, he knew he had $1,000 more that he could discount. And his automatic intention was to just go ahead and drop that $1,000 to try and overcome the objection. Mm-hmm. But now he's sitting there back at square one, except now he's at $9,000 instead of $10,000, still overcoming the same objection. Right. So in the software, when we made it so that he cannot discount below a certain profit margin, he was able to still negotiate and close the deals because he knew that was his rock bottom minimum profit margin. So eventually, once I made the app really good for myself as a sales rep, and other sales reps started to adopt it, we then started making the app really good for everyone else. Right. So I made it a closing tool for me to make my life easier. And then I started getting feedback from other reps where they had a slightly different style or made different errors that I didn't make and didn't think of to put in the software. And as the company that I worked for started to adopt it, and I was fortunate enough to work for a company that had, they had about 40 or 50 sales reps that covered 6 states in the Mid-Atlantic area. What was nice was, once they started to adopt it, we got a lot of feedback from a bunch of different departments, not just sales. So we had the sales management who was giving us feedback like, hey, I want to know what time my sales rep got to the house, or I want to know, what time my sales rep finished so that I can, schedule him for his second lead. I need to be alerted when he's finished so that I can schedule for him his second appointment. I need to be able to push the information directly into the CRM, because before we were just emailing all of our documents to a sales manager, and then it turned to the office manager, and then they would take and upload it into the CRM. So we're like, hey, we want the app to directly upload the information into the CRM and eliminate that step. We had our call center had input on the application, because once you control the entire sales process with software, you now have access to information that you don't have access to, because there is no real transparency on what a sales rep is doing on an appointment unless you have a sales manager sitting next to him on every single appointment. Right. So when you have a piece of software in there that covers every step of their sales process, you can now really have a bird's eye view of exactly what your reps are doing in the house, which is not just like a big brother or a policing tool to make sure they are doing what they're supposed to be doing in the house, but it then can become a marketing tool. Because if you have a rehash department, or even if you have a sales manager doing rehash, or your sales rep is doing rehash, there's information that the app is gathering that you currently don't have. For an example, all the photos that you take during the estimating process can automatically be attached to our back end and or uploaded into the CRM. So if you have a call center rep that's going in and calling back to try and get somebody back out onto the house because you didn't sell it on the first appointment, you would have all the photos that you can use to create urgency over a meeting like this or a phone call. You can talk about the condition of the siding or the windows or the roof based on the pictures that the sales rep had taken. We also have every measurement and product selection that was made in the application. So I remember I would have my clipboard, and I would run 2 to 3 leads a day, and I would get to the office maybe twice a week, and that was a lot. So when I would get to the office, I had a clipboard full of measure sheets, contracts, survey questions that I was asking. Most of them didn't have customers' names on. Of course, contracts would, but the measure sheets wouldn't. And even if I knew which measure sheet went with which customer, I still would not be able to interpret the measurements, right? Because I'm measuring, this little section plus this section. Like if you're doing a roof and it's all cut up, right, you have no idea what your chicken scratch measurements actually related to. So when we started using Leap, this was aggregating all of that data for us and pushing it back into the CRM. And it's funny you're wearing a Market Sharp shirt, because that's the CRM that we were using. That was our first integration we ever did. Nice. Yep. So I reached out to Market Sharp because the company I worked for used them, and I asked if I could integrate my app directly with them, because all the data that needed to go in Market Sharp was being generated inside of our app. So it only made sense just to connect that pipe and say, hey, go ahead and push all that data in there, because before it was just emailing it. And we were emailing it to the office, and then somebody was manually attaching it to Market Sharp. They were great partners. They still are great partners, and we hooked that thing up, and it's been fantastic. But now all the leads dispatch from the CRM Market Sharp to Leap, and then once it originates from Market Sharp, we then tie all of the data, whether you're sending a contract, a proposal, a measure sheet, photos, all that stuff then pushes back into Market Sharp, as well as dispositioning the lead. So when you want to change the result or the result reason, all of that information will all come from Leap. And it made it to where we didn't even have to, as a sales rep, I didn't even have to log into Market Sharp. All my data came from Market Sharp. I did it all in Leap, and then all the data pushed back into Market Sharp. And we have since integrated with, I think, 4 other CRMs that are pretty popular in the industry. Job Nimbus is one, Lead Perfection, Improve It 360, and Salesforce. Right. So if you use any of those, we connect directly to them and push it in. But initially, like if you don't use a CRM at all, which there's still a lot of contractors that don't, Leap is a great first step, because a lot of times adding a CRM into your ecosystem is like a new thing. Like it's a new step or a new process that's kind of foreign to what they're doing now. Leap is a good stepping stone, because everything that we do, you're already doing. It's just we're digitizing it. You know what I mean? You're already creating estimates. You're already filling out measure sheets. You're already writing up proposals. You're already possibly sending emails. We're just going to take and wrap that all into one piece of software that later on, if you want to then connect to a CRM, you can easily just flip that thing on, and everything you were doing in Leap will just then push into a CRM so that you can pick up from where Leap leaves off, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, to kind of close the story, this is a really long-winded answer to your question of how Leap got started. But the company that New Look, they adopted a company-wide, and actually got to the point where like they would shut down if Leap were to go down. Like they were just every part of their business was Leap. From marketing was using the reports that were coming out of Leap to do rehash deals. You had production who didn't want a handwritten contract. It got to the point where they said, because there was like a overlap of digital contracts, and some reps just weren't picking it up right away, and they were still doing handwritten ones. And there was like a transition of like, well, you can't do, for instance, we couldn't do doors at first because they were so complicated. We had a door contract that you would handwrite, but you do everything else digital. So there's like a buffer period where, let's say 50% of the contracts are coming in digital. The other 50% were coming in with the carbon copy handwritten contracts. And it got to the point where production didn't even want to do anything with the handwritten contracts because they had to interpret 40 or 50 sales reps handwriting, because everybody has different handwriting. There were errors and omissions that were just didn't need to be made, that were unnecessary. And actually, it got to the point where the app was pretty much like done. I had some like little feature requests, and it was enough to where the company, it was enough for what everybody had asked for, and without going in and gutting everything and just adding a ton of time and resources to it, it just wasn't worth it to go in and do it.
Sorry, quickly. At this point, you've got company-wide adoption. It sounds like it's an integral part of the business, whereby if it shuts down, like you say, company comes to a halt. Was your time, were you still involved on sales, or were you like heavy on supporting Leap, building it? Were you seeing like your wheels turning, thinking like, wow, this is I've got a business on my hands here? Like, what was that?
So it's a great segue. So initially I did not do it to make money. Like it was a hobby, and I got a kick out of the company using it. I was like here's a company, they're about 40 or $50 million in revenue. This is a software I built initially in my bedroom, just as a hobby. I had no teacher, no professor, no peer or anything. It was just literally reading books, going through online tutorials, and just all of my free time, still all of my free time and all of my working time now is dedicated into this software application. So I actually started getting phone calls where reps who used it would go work for somebody else that happens, turnover, especially in sales. And I started getting phone calls like, hey, Steve, this is such and such. I used to work with you over at New Look. You had that software. The owner of my company is really interested in it. Could, you talk to them? And I was like, no, I'm not interested. It's too much, to manage. I'm running my leads, and it's hard enough managing the 50 reps that I have using it now. Having a whole nother company with a whole different setup and price guide, I don't even want any parts of it. And then, I got another phone call from a different rep, and another phone call from a different rep. And then I got one from this guy that I work with, which I'm still friends with today. I was really close friends with him when I worked with him. And he says, he called me up. He's like, hey, Steve, I am working for this guy who actually sits on the board of the Maryland Home Improvement Commission. And I was telling him about your software and the things that it did for New Look and how it helped them grow, et cetera. And he's very interested in it. Can you come have lunch with him? And I was like, look, I'm not, you don't understand. Like, I would love to do that. That would be very, very cool if I could have a second company that's using it. I'm flattered that you think my software is that great. But it's just the time that it would take to set it up and manage it. I was like, I would have to quit doing in-home sales, which is really what pays my bills. At this point, I'm really not making any money on the thing. New Look gave me some money here and there to help support it. But my primary income was, running leads and selling deals. And so then eventually, like, he called me a couple times, and he was very persistent, thankfully. And eventually I took him up on the lunch offer. He said, look, man, just come up here. We haven't seen each other in a while. It's been a year or so since I worked there. Just come up, talk to him, have lunch. Worst case scenario, we'll shake hands and we don't do it. And I went up there, and I met with the owner of the company, and we had lunch, and I basically just told him, I was like, look, man, it's just a lot to manage. And, yes, it does this, and yes, it does that, and yes, it will fix that, and yes, it will fix that, and yes, it does that. And he was like asking me all these questions of what it does. And I'm answering all that. Yeah, it does that. Yeah, we thought of that. Yes, it does that. And it was just, what it made me realize was, hey, there are some real pain points that this guy is trying to solve in his business that I have solved. I have it. I have it sitting in my pocket on my iPhone, and I can solve all those things that you just gave me
You felt
for your
selfish.
business.
You felt
Yeah.
selfish not giving
And,
it to him.
and,
Yeah.
and then, so then I was like, man, maybe, maybe there is a business opportunity here. Like the salesman in me was like immediately like, hey, I need to close this guy on a sale. But then it was the burden of, of supporting it.
Right.
And I knew that, hey, if I was going to give this thing a shot, I would have to quit doing in-home sales.
Mm-hmm.
So the owner of that company, he actually he's like, tell me what it's going to cost, and I gave him a price, and he says, okay, let's do it. And I couldn't believe it. And it was a lay down. We called them lay downs, right? It was just like the easiest sale that you can make, and it was because the value that the software had created for him far outweighed the cost that it would cost him to implement it. And the cost that it gave him was a substantial amount of money, because I had to quit doing in-home sales, which was paying my bills. I have we're a family of 5. I have 3 kids. My wife, wife's a stay-at-home mom, right? I had to make sure that we had enough money to pay our bills. So I went back to New Look and I said, hey, I'm going to give this thing a shot. I think I saved up like 6 months worth of bills. And I was like, I'm going to give this thing a shot and see where it goes, because I had multiple companies that were interested in it. Right out the gate. Like, so as soon as I said, okay, I'm a business, I would go back to them and say, okay, I'm ready to sell it to you. The other thing was I had a product that was already finished. Like, it was already proven to work. We already had people using it. So going to market, like especially in software, usually involves, hey, I have an idea. I need to go get funding. You raise your funding, you hire some people, you're building it, you're running in the red forever. You have no customers for the first 2-3 years while you're building the software. Then you launch it, you're still running in the red because you're trying to get customers. I didn't have that because I had a product that was years old. I mean, 3-4 years old when we actually took it to market, and all the bugs and kinks and all that worked out. I had to do a couple modifications to make it work for multiple companies, because at the time it was built for one, but that literally took me 30 days max. And then I also had partners. So we had integrated with MarketSharp. We had integrated with a lender called Service Finance, because that's who I used for lending when I was doing in-home sales. And all of the partners and people that we talked to, we were like doing integrated. We also integrated with Provia. That was another one. So I used to sell Provia doors. So I solved the door problem with contracts by just integrating directly with the door manufacturer and making the contracts just auto-generate. So a rep don't have to type anything in. But anyway, I was getting feedback from partners, from sales reps, from other business owners that, hey, this is a thing that our customers or we or I would like to use. And along with having that lunch with that guy, and then him just, it was a lay down deal. Like, and not that we like ripped him off. I mean, he was worth every penny. They're still a customer. They're 100% happy. They've done customer testimonial for us, et cetera. And it was just, that was the amount of money that I needed to be able to stand this thing up and support them to make sure that it was successful when we launched it. And that's kind of the story. Once we took this thing to market, it was actually overwhelming at first, because I was sitting here in this home office that I'm sitting in now doing this interview. And I had no way to really support the way that I wanted to the customers that were coming on to us. Like, it was just all word of mouth. We had done 0 advertising. So it was just word of mouth through MarketSharp, through Provia, through Service Finance, through other sales reps were contacting me, and I was doing demos and webinars, et cetera. And we just started bringing on customers faster than I could support them, because at the time it was just me. And so then I went back to the owners at New Look, and they're the smart business people. They grew a huge a home improvement company, and I said, hey, look, I want to take this thing to market. I want to get serious about it. I have customers that are beating our door down to sign up. I'm going to need some capital. I need to hire some people, and I need some knowledge on business and how to do this, and human capital and training and departments and financing and blah, 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 blah. So they put some money behind it. signed a deal with them, and they said, okay, yes, we've seen what it did for our company, and this can be bigger than our company. So we're going to go ahead and see, we're going to give this thing a shot with you. And they jumped on board. And we hired our first employer, name's Kainat. She still works with us. She's a Leap wizard. Any of our customers who are watching this and work with Kainat, they will agree. And we hired her, and we got an office, a very small office, a little bit bigger than this one. And actually, initially, we were going to do it in my basement. We were going to convert my basement into a home office. But when we started hiring employees like Kainat, we didn't want her to come into my house. We wanted it to be a real, legit thing. So we signed a lease for a really tiny office, a little bit bigger than this room. And it was just Kainat and I sitting in this office. I would go in every day at 8:30. She would meet me there. She had a computer. I had nothing for her to do at the time because I had no dashboard or anything for her to log into. So as I was building that out, I was training her how the product worked, all the pain points. She didn't come from the industry, so she was very good learner, but she didn't know really anything about the industry. And she picked it up so quick. She was a godsend for us. She picked it up so quick, and then we started bringing on customers. Anything that she could do, she did. Anything that she couldn't do, I would pick up. And then we hired Walker Matthews, which is our COO, and he comes from like the app world. He worked for a company that was in the payment space with collecting credit cards and stuff like that via email. And we hired him to really help build out all the different functions, because myself and the guys that I partnered with were very good at selling home improvements and building a business like that, but we really didn't know how to build a software business. So we hired Walker on, and he, another godsend, really like to help build, okay, we need the support function, and we start building out all of our support. We need a sales function, and here's how we're going to do the sales, and we need to do marketing and operations, and just built that whole entire thing out. Our dev team, he helped build that out and hire the right people. We have since we hired him, we have grown. I think we have like 40 or 41 employees. We have 2 separate offices. We cover, I think, all the states in the United States. We have some companies in Canada. And if you count the Owens Corning product, we probably have close to 10,000 users who are using the application now across the United States and Canada. We signed a white label deal with Owens Corning, which is a Fortune 500 company. And when we demoed the software to them, they'll tell you we're the best there is in this category of software. And they signed a deal to make our software theirs. And so that's what's called the Owens Corning ProCell app. And if you go in the App Store and you look up Owens Corning and find the ProCell, that is actually Leap under the hood, which that was a huge accomplishment or achievement for us and myself, sure. Yeah. Because this was a software, that was just built out of necessity as a hobby initially. And then now we have a Fortune 500 company who has adopted this and are pushing it through all of their contractor network. So I still get a kick out of that. I mean, when I look at our analytics and stuff like that and see how many people use it and how many contracts are created and how many now billions of dollars that are being facilitated through our platform, it's amazing to go back and think of how this thing all originated was with just this little Excel spreadsheet that I used to use on my own as a sales rep, just running leads mainly to save me time because I was lazy. Sales reps, it's a good trait to have, being lazy. And I wanted to know what my commission was the instant that I sold the thing. You know what I mean? And that's really how the thing started and evolved into now what is way bigger than what I ever thought it would be.
Awesome. Yeah, quite surreal. That's a beautiful success story. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that's awesome. So, a lot of success in a relatively short period of time. I'm sure you hit some hurdles along the way. Did you ever get to a point where you're like, okay, I got to throw the towel in here. I don't know. This is too difficult. This is, I didn't sign up for this. Or did you ever have that?
So I've had some very difficult times. I'll tell you in detail. One of them, and it happened twice. And, but I never said I was going to quit. I was always, I will figure it out. This was something that I couldn't, quitting was not an option, still not an option. And, because I was self-taught, I didn't know what I didn't know. You know what I mean? So I didn't know if I was very good, if I was just scratching the surface. I didn't know. I knew enough to build an app, and I knew where to go to get the information I needed to make my thing do what I wanted it to do. But I didn't know if I knew everything I needed to know. It was actually my birthday weekend. I went out with some friends and we went bowling. I got an email or text, I think it was from a customer that I was on a text message basis with, which was a screenshot of an error they were getting in the application. And immediately all the blood just ran out of my face. I knew what that error was. And that error meant that our servers were down. And so we were in Amazon Web Services, and I had changed nothing. Usually, like if your server goes down or whatever, it's you usually have either deployed an update recently, right, and it has some breaking changes in it. And the way you fix that immediately is just to revert back to the previous working version, and then fix your thing that where it was failing, and then deploy the code with the fixes in it. Or you have some unusual traffic, which usually wasn't the case for us because the way that we built our back end was it scales with the traffic. So I don't think we've ever went down because of traffic, because it would just spin up more instances as the traffic goes up. So anyway, I was getting this error, and I literally just put my bowling shoes on, just started bowling, and I was like, I can't bowl. I got to figure this out. At that point we had 2,000, 3,000 people who were using the application, and I said, I can't be bowling knowing that my server's down. So my buddy luckily had his laptop in his truck, and he went out to his truck, got his laptop, and I'm sitting in the bowling alley, like trying to figure out what's going on with the servers. And I couldn't figure it out. And I didn't have anyone, like I didn't know what to do. Like there was no one, the servers were down. All the things that I knew to spin them back up weren't working. And I was like, I just didn't know what to do. We didn't have the team that we have now. Like we have a whole dev team and people that know way more than I do in programming and server infrastructure and stuff at the time. I was the only one that knew how to, and I just followed some tutorials to set this thing up. And so I ended up, I told my wife, I was like, sorry, we have to go. I abandoned my friends. I said, you guys can bowl, do whatever you want. I got to go. We jumped in our vehicle, drove home. I got behind my computer where I know I had internet, and I sat there, and it took me probably 4 hours. I was so stressed. I'll never forget that day. I had people emailing me. I had people texting me, what's going on? And I had no answers. Like I didn't know what to do because I didn't know enough about Amazon Web Services in the back end to stand it up. And it ended up being something so stupid that I eventually figured out. It's amazing how much I learned in that 4-hour window about servers and scaling and troubleshooting and back end. It was unbelievable how much I learned. Yeah. But it ended up being the version that I was using to run all the tests on was, let's say, version 10. But the version that we were deploying to was version 8. And they weren't compatible. And it was some update that was done, automatically. And when that update was done, it just messed things up. So it was as simple as just saying, hey, we want to use version 10 instead of version 8. That's all. It was a little drop down on Amazon Web Services to select and hit save, and everything came back up. But it took me 4 hours to troubleshoot that. All the while, we had customers who were trying to use it, trying to run appointments, and the thing wasn't working. It was the most stressful part of the entire thing. I'll never forget it. It happened twice. We have since put things in place because you learn from that, right? So you don't know what you don't know, and we learned from that. We put things in place to make sure we're always updated. It happened later on, which was actually due to scaling. So we started bringing more and more customers on. We got more and more activity, and our servers weren't scaling fast enough, and we layered things into there. But yeah, that was probably the most stressful part of the whole entire thing.
Yeah. Well, good on you. Congrats.
Thanks.
Another one for you, Steve. Leap, the frog. So, you built Leap. You could have built Angry Birds. You decided to build Leap. Yeah. Where does the name come from?
Great question. So when we were brainstorming ideas, we wanted a name that was unique in a sense of like it really didn't mean anything to that industry, because we want to be able to, if in the future we wanted to branch it out to anything, right? Because there's parts of our app that could be used for any industry. So we wanted a name that wasn't tied specifically to home improvements. And we knew that our software was going to be a huge change for contractors, because our industry, the home improvement industry, is one of the only industries that's left untapped with technology. If you go in any other industry, it's a technology. I went and bought a truck with my wife, and all the guy's desk was like a huge screen, and all the paperwork was signed on the desk, right? So like at the he had this pen, and you click a button and it'll flip around, and his desk was a computer screen that you signed all your paper with. So they have car vending machines now. Real estate is all done on the internet now. So home improvements is one of the only ones where a guy will still come to your house with a carbon copy contract on a clipboard, and he handwrites everything down.
Right.
So we knew that taking software into this industry was going to be a huge change or move forward in in the industry. So we started looking up words for moving forward, a big jump forward. And initially we came up with the word propel, and we are just going to call it propel. We looked up like domain names, and I think we could get something close. Like, it's very hard to get like one word domain names. But it's like we could own that space of propel. And I remember when I signed up that first customer, going back to that lunch, and I went back and we had a company name and we signed them up. The girl who actually was doing all the paperwork, she said, "So did you guys come up with a name for your company yet?" I was like, "Yeah, I think we're going to go with Propel." And she's like, "Oh, like the water." And then immediately I was like, "Oh, no, well, we can't go with that because I don't want to be, it's Propel, the software application, or Propel the water." And so then we went back to the drawing board, and I forget which one of us came up with it. But somebody had said, "Leap, what about Leap?" Because that's like a jump forward, moving forward in the industry. And I was like, "Hey, I that's perfect." Everybody was like unanimous. As soon as somebody brought it up, it was like unanimous that that's the name.
Right. Nice.
Yep. And then that's where we came up with the domain name Leap to Digital, because that's kind of what it references. You're taking a huge leap from the way you're doing it now to going digital.
And that domain was available.
Yep.
Well, Steve, thanks for sharing the story. I think it's quite interesting for anyone who hasn't heard it. They're going to get a lot of joy out of listening to that. It's a nice success story, and it's cool that you're able to do it without necessarily, a whole lot of outside funding. You're able to kind of build it internally, validate it for a couple of years. So very unconventional way of building a SaaS. So that's cool. Thanks for listening, everyone. Really hope that you enjoyed that story. Now stick around, because in part 2, Steve Stencil is going to walk us through the Leap platform. He's going to share all the features and the benefits of what using a tool like this can do for your business. For the podcast listeners out there, sorry, this is one you're going to have to head over to YouTube to see. I definitely recommend it. It'll be worth it. Cheers.